Welcome, one and all, the Chapter 1, Section 4 notes, writing linear equations. Hey, I gotta be honest with you, this is a good one to look through. This is one of those things where people tend to forget how to do this. We get to an assessment test or a semester exam or final exam. This is like number one as far as things people forget how to do. So check this one out. So the key is to write an equation that's in slope-intercept form. So we can also write it in standard form, but this is usually the easiest way to go right here with that guy. So I think everybody remembers or knows that the m in slope-intercept form stands for the slope. And in this case, in the example that you're shown, that slope's -3. And the b stands for the y-intercept. So this is where it gets a little confusing because if you see the blank right below, it says the y. So we'll get to that in a second. But the y-intercept, excuse me, in this case is the 12, the number on the end. But here's what everybody tends to forget. The x stands for something. Well, if you were to graph some points on an xy axis, you're graphing an x coordinate and you're graphing a y coordinate. So they stand for coordinates. But the key is not to confuse these two guys. The b and the y mean something completely different. All right, so over here on the right, some things to know as far as finding things. If we checked out or did section 1-3, which you should have by now, there were 3 different ways to find slope, and there they are. So that's really the first thing we want to do. You find a slope, then you're halfway home. And finding the y-intercept is the part that everybody forgets. One way would be to look at the graph. I mean, that's pretty obvious. If you're shown a graph and it crosses at 2, then the y-intercept is 2. If it crosses at -4, then the y-intercept is -4. But if you can't see the graph, then here's what we do. We plug in 2 numbers, one for x and one for y. So off we go here. Example number 1. So we'll give you one this easy on a quiz, but not all of them are going to be this easy. If you're given the slope, and the slope always goes, or is the number that goes in front of the x, I'm going to write it in front of the x. And if the y-intercept is the guy that goes on the end, and we give you those 2 pieces of information, it's literally that easy. You're just going to write a y and x, a slope in front of the x, and the y-intercept on the end. So that's a done deal. So number 2, you're given a slope. So we can start off the same way we did in the last one. And we can say, yeah, I'm going to put that -3 in front of the x. But the temptation would be to put this guy on the end. But again, it's different. It doesn't say in the problem it's a y-intercept. So we have to remember that stands for an x coordinate. That guy, the -5, stands for a y coordinate. And that's not the same thing as a y-intercept. So you don't know the y-intercept at this point. So that's why I'm putting a b. Well, what can we do? Well, up there in the directions, it said that you can take the y and plug it in for y because it stands for a y coordinate. You can take the x coordinate, which is a 4, and you can plug it in for the x because it literally means the x coordinate. And then we can figure out b, so we don't know that yet. So really pretty simple equation to solve from here. Just going to times these 2 guys together. How do I get a -12 to the other side? I'm going to add it. You can put the little plus 12 for work underneath if you feel more comfortable doing that. But either way, we add 12 and we get 7. So don't quit here. Final answer is to always write it in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form goes y equals whatever the slope was, which you were given, followed by an x, followed by the y-intercept, which we figured out was 7. So there we go. Done and done. Okay, so let's advance a little bit more here. On number 3, we did not give you the y-intercept. We didn't give you the slope either. But if you are given 2 sets of coordinates, we recall this formula. Slope formula. And that will get you the slope and get us started. So y2, well, what's the second y coordinate? It's -1 minus, what's y1? That's the 9 over second x coordinate minus first x coordinate. And all we got to do is pick up a calculator if you need to. -10 on top, 2 on the bottom. And finally, that gives me a -5. So we're going to proceed on this one like we did on the last problem. Y equals mx plus b. Well, I know what the m is now. So I can put my slope in front of the x where it normally goes. But again, it'd be really tempting to go ahead and put a number there for b. But unless it literally tells you in the problem what the y-intercept is, unless you're literally looking at a graph where you can see where it crosses the y-axis, you don't know it yet. Okay, now here's the good news. Since these two sets of coordinates up here are both on the same line, you can pick either one to plug in. So I would pick the one with the positive numbers just to make it a little easier. Both will get you the same answer. So now don't mix them, use one or the other. So the 9 for the y-coordinate, already knew my slope, times the x-coordinate, which is a 1, plus the b, then solve. Multiply those guys out. How do I get a minus 5 to the other side? I add it. I got 14. So final answer, excuse me, slope-intercept form is always y equals whatever the slope was, followed by an x, followed by b. Got it. All right, number 4. So this time we didn't give you a slope, we didn't give you coordinates, but we gave you an equation to mess with. So let's look back up here real quick. Different ways to find the slope. Slope formula, well, we did that on the last problem. So if we're given an equation, which is this guy right here, says, hey, get y by itself, and then you're going to know the slope for that one. In general speaking, anything to do with graphing means you're probably going to take whatever equation you had and get y by itself. Well, how do I get y by itself on this guy? I just need rid of the 4, and I got it. So I'm going to get rid of the 4 by dividing. Okay, now here's why this gets a little bit tricky. So think about this for a second. If you say parallel, that implies there's 2 lines. So my slope right here, when reduced, would be 1/2. So imagine here's one line, and there's a parallel line. Well, are these 2 lines going to cross through the same y-intercept? No. One of them's going to cross higher than the other one. So this 11/4 that's down here on the end is meaningless to me. I don't need it. It's the other line. It's the one I gave you. You're looking for the other one. So really all I need is this slope right here that we just found. And again, 2/4 reduces down to 1/2. So the slope of the one line is 1/2. The slope of the other line is also 1/2. Therefore, I want to use 1/2. But the key is not to use the 11/4. Again, nowhere in the problem did it flat out tell you what b was. And besides that, I would ask, did we ever use the -6 and 2 for anything? There's got to be a reason for it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have given it to you. So we're going to plug those in like we did the other ones. So once you get to this point, it's always plugging in coordinates. Although number 6 is going to be a little bit different. Okay, now be careful. Don't accidentally put the -6 in for the y. The 2 is the y coordinate. -6 is the x coordinate. Plus b. So you notice these guys are all shaping up the same towards the end here. Well, what's half of 6? 3. So half of -6 is -3. And one more time, how do we get the b by itself? We're going to move that 3 by adding him. And I got b equals 5. So writing a final answer, same deal. Slope-intercept form y equals, what was the slope we found? It was 1/2 x plus, what was b? 5. Okay, coincidence, these have all been positive b's, so they could be negative as well. All right, it's running a little low on time here, so I'm not going to be able to do both problems, so I'm going to save them both for part 2. And actually, number 6 is really kind of an important one. It's the easiest one on this set of notes. It'll be the easiest one on a quiz, and yet, for reasons hopefully you'll see if you watch part 2 video, it's the one that's missed the most. So please tune in for part 2. Thanks for watching part 1.